Okie dokie. So, I think we are good to go. Record.
Great.
Guest. Marit Stiles, leader of Ontario's NDP. Thank you so much for coming on to Toronto the Politics, the show today.
It's great to be here. I'm a fan.
Oh, yeah. And thank you so much for having me. You know, we're abiding by any sort of campaign finance laws. You know, we are not in Queen's Park building proper. We're out here in the park, public property.
Public property. I mean, this is actually, I've done a lot of videos out here myself. I consider this kind of an extension of our studio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Queen's Park.
I should see if Doug is around right now and he can be the second guest.
He's around. He was spotted at Queen's Park today, but he's only doing CNN, I believe.
That's too bad. Well, it's me and CNN are kind of neck and neck right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth a try.
It's funny that he is hanging around the building right now because I know that you think that he's not doing enough work on a specific issue. We're in a trade war. I think that's fair to say. How do you think the Premier is currently responding to that war?
Well, look, I mean, this isn't just something that happened overnight, right? I mean, this has been going on now for a year and a half. It was the excuse he used to go into the last election very early compared to what it was scheduled for. And he's had a year and a half to put in place measures that were going to protect Ontario, build Ontario, and we've seen remarkably little of that. What we seem to have seen more of is basically a lot of deals that benefit a lot of big companies, big corporations. In fact, a lot of deals that benefit U.S. corporations, which we can get back to, but like just think about the gift cards he gave to every teacher in the province that are only allowed to use them at Staples. So, you know, he's done a lot of that kind of thing, but we haven't really seen a whole lot of measures that are there to protect working people, to protect communities. And I think that's really unfortunate. And then, you know, just this latest round, the last few days, what we've seen is, you know, hurling insults. It's great for, like, you know, he gets that little viral moment maybe, but you know, what does it actually do to help regular people who are struggling with regular things like how am I going to pay for my groceries? My rent keeps going through the roof. And yeah, I'm worried about my job too.
What do you think about that kind of blustery approach? Like, it sometimes feels like Mark Carney plays good cop, Doug Ford comes in as bad cop. How do you think that's going over?
Well, he changes. I mean, to be fair, Ford changes it day by day. I mean, last night he was all, you know, ready to fight Donald Trump. And then this morning he's like, all of a sudden he's being real nice again. So I don't know. I tend to think that the Premier, for the most part, changes his tune all the time just to get a little attention and to, frankly, distract from some of the other things that are going on there. I don't think he really knows what to do. And I think, you know, he's talked a lot about, oh yeah, we're Team Canada. But again, he's not really in sync a lot of the time with where the Prime Minister's at. So, and, you know, we can disagree with, you know, some of the path and certainly that Carney has chosen. But I think Doug, you know, wants to be, you know, he's wanted to be Captain Canada from day one, and he's out there trying to be that again.
What could the province have done differently in the lead up to this new round of negotiations to put Ontarians in a better place?
Well, I mean, first of all, again, we've heard a lot of talk about projects that we're going to use Canadian products, Canadian manufacturing. Like a good example might be steel, right? Yep. Or another one, forestry. You know, I travel a lot around the province, and I've gone to lots of mills. I've seen mills closing in the last couple of years, like in the last year alone, many mills in Northern Ontario closing. And they will tell you, and I've been to those mills, and they've said, look, you know, we make enough wood here that we could build. I was at one mill in Thunder Bay, 86,000 homes, they said, you know, with our lumber. But instead, we are forced to sell our lumber to Home Depot in the United States. So it's a very simple example, but if we were actually building homes, if Ontario was building the homes and the government did what we've proposed for years, like, which is a whole other subject, but Homes Ontario, like a provincial agency, we could actually be buying our Ontario lumber, building Ontario homes. And that's just one small example of something we could actually be doing right now that creates that market for our own products. So from an industry perspective, that's a big one. And then the other stuff is like, obviously we need a relief package for workers that are going to be impacted because it's going to get worse before it gets better. Yeah.
Why isn't legislature sitting right now?
That's a very good question. I think the simple answer is because Doug Ford does not like to be asked questions, and he doesn't want to be in the legislature because that's what happens. He is, to some extent, and he very rarely shows up, but when he does, he doesn't like to ask the questions of the opposition, which, I always say to people, like, I see my job as the opposition leader in Ontario as asking the questions that everybody else would love to ask the premier. So, I'm channeling those questions. We're asking him sometimes for more accountability and transparency, and he doesn't want to be held to account.
In the past sitting, this session, there's been a lot of these late night sittings. Is that correct?
Not that many, actually.
Okay.
It's interesting because since the Conservatives came into power, they've changed a lot of the rules.
Yeah.
And so, the laws essentially of how we pass legislation. And so now it can be passed very quickly without even necessarily going to a committee, without, debate like we used to have to do. So there's some debate, but not much. And as a result of that, they can basically at any point say, okay, we are time allocating this, which means we're just going to move right to the votes. And so sometimes we do end up having to have a little bit of a late night sitting for them to pass the bill, but it's much more rare than it used to be. I think the last time we've only had a couple in the whole 8 years that the government's been elected. We've only had a few all night sittings.
This, the machinations with the rules of government.
Yeah.
What effect do you think that's having?
Well, it's an erosion of our democracy, an erosion of transparency and accountability. But it's more than anything, it is just an erosion of democracy because, these processes are put in place. And the reason there is an opposition, which Doug Ford finds, very, very, very distasteful. Doesn't like to be challenged at all. But the reason it exists is so that, we actually have, we can have people shine a light on law, so we can actually debate things, so we can hear from others, people who will be impacted, experts. That's why you go to committees. That's why you have hearings. And a lot of that has been pretty much eliminated. We only see these things taking place like a traveling committee or something like that to debate legislation or hear from other people when it's a bill that the government wants to focus on or get some attention for. So when it's kind of in their wheelhouse. But when it's something that people are really opposed to, take, for example, the Bill 5. There was a provincial version and a federal version of that legislation. And, when you're talking about doing away with all kinds of mechanisms in the planning process and stuff, then of course, and, just steamrolling over people's rights, the government didn't want to hear from people. Big surprise.
Why do you think Premier Ford feels more comfortable to start manipulating the rules of the game compared to previous governments?
I think Mr. Ford and his people have made a calculation, and perhaps they were right that there has been a shift away. People are struggling a lot with just the regular day-to-day stuff. They don't, as you probably are very aware, like a lot of people right now, you're more concerned with feeding your family, making your rent, than you are about having political, like what's going on in the legislature. That's a real thing. And also, I think we've come to a place of where there's such division that a lot of people don't want to talk politics and in their home anymore with their families because it's so divisive. And I think they've used that moment to slide in a lot of these changes. It was a calculation. And, there hasn't been a massive uproar, but that's unfortunate because really at the end of the day, the reason he gets away with doing some of the things he does is because they have actually changed the rules of democracy.
And the lack of transparency and,
changing the FOI laws.
Yeah, what were the changes there?
So, basically, we used to be able to use this thing called the Freedom of Information laws to you could have used it. Journalists, just members of the public, and ourselves as the opposition would submit requests saying for information, like I'd like to see the conversations, emails between this minister and this person. And of course, there were already big restrictions around this. Like anything that was, providing any private information or anything that they considered cabinet confidentiality, they would eliminate from what we got. It would be blacked out. But you could request those things. And now they're basically saying almost anything that the Conservative MPPs touch, their ministers, their parliamentary assistants, all of that, the Premier, his office, everybody is now off limits. So what it essentially means is they've just put down like a big, they've shuttered a lot of the information that we would have normally been able to access. And so it's now what we see happening is there's just fewer ways to get information. And of course, this all happened. And the reason this happened is because, or the timing of it is because Doug Ford was ordered by a judge to actually provide his cell phone records, like information from his cell phone, which again would have been redacted if it covered anything private. And I can tell you, I have no interest in, and I don't think anybody does, in Doug Ford's personal affairs. What we want to know, what we want to know, what journalists were looking for this information was because they want to connect, they want to understand how he made certain decisions, in this case, particularly related to the Greenbelt, but other issues. And a judge ordered him that he had to actually do that because he's doing government business. And so instead of actually providing it, he changed the laws of the land. And yes, he can do that.
Can you explain the Greenbelt scandal? Like how did this start and where are we at now?
So, the Greenbelt is this big swath of land, that was protected for generations, really, because it's mostly farmland. It's very important farmland, but it's also land that's really important environmentally. It's a carbon sink. It helps us to prevent flooding, et cetera, et cetera. Many, many good reasons to protect the Greenbelt. And Doug Ford, when he was being elected, running in the election in 2018 to be the premier, he said, don't worry, people out there in the world, I'm not going to touch the Greenbelt, because there's been concerns that he was interested, and there were a lot of developers very excited purchasing land and wanting to be able to develop in the Greenbelt. And there's, of course, restrictions around that. So he went out and told developers behind the scenes, while he was telling Ontarians to the camera, it's fine, I won't touch the Greenbelt. Behind the scenes, he was on, secretly filmed, I guess, saying, you know what? We're going to carve this up. We're going to develop it. It's going to be great. And that's exactly what he started to do when he was elected. And we found out, I really prosecuted him in the legislature for many months over this. It was, as you know, like we came to find that there had been certain developers that benefited from this carving up of the Greenbelt were seated at his, kids' weddings, very close personal friends of the premier, and all of these close personal friends of the premier were set to benefit by millions and billions of, this was big money. So we made those connections. We went to the integrity commissioner, we went to the auditor, and we said, look at this. This does not smell right. And investigations were conducted, pretty damning, I will say. And in the end, it resulted in an RCMP criminal investigation, which is still underway in this very moment, looking into the premier, his staff, and key ministers. And so, how did they come to the decision? We know it came up in the Integrity Commissioner's report that he actually received key staff as well received maps showing them which parcels of land these developers wanted freed up from the Greenbelt. So it's pretty dirty. I've called it corruption, and I believe it is.
Why is that not, if I'm someone who's struggling to find housing, it's so, expensive to find a house anywhere. This is just how politics goes, Why is that something that a typical Ontarian should be concerned about, that's how a deal like that is coming to fruition? What's the problem there? How does that hurt people in Ontario?
Well, first of all, because, we go through all these big processes, like the City of Toronto, in deciding what our planning priorities are. We have, in most parts of this province, some interest in avoiding unnecessary sprawl. We've kind of come to this place. And so we can build. that's a whole other conversation. Probably we can get into that about housing and how we should be building housing. But I think why people should care about the Greenbelt specifically is that we are losing an extraordinary amount of farmland every single day in Ontario. And, if there was ever a moment when it was clear that we need to be able to grow our own food, it's right now. When we are under attack by the United States, we have to be able to grow our own food. It's a major industry. We need to protect it. We need to protect prime farmland. It's one of the great advantages we have. So for that reason, to prevent floods and as well, and other kinds of impacts of climate change, we need the Greenbelt, and we can build in other ways. And I think what those guys are talking about doing isn't building, let's be clear, affordable housing. What they're interested in doing is building luxury housing. They want to build big houses and spread it out as far as they can. And that's just not what most Ontarians need right now. What Ontarians need is affordable homes. And that is not what that plan or what this government is delivering.
What is your vision for more affordable homes?
Well, first of all, we need to save the homes that people have. So when we
What do you mean by that?
Well, when we talk about housing, we're not just talking about building new homes. We have to talk about the fact that a lot of people are losing their homes because rent just keeps going up and up and up. And, I meet people all the time, everywhere I go across the entire province, which is, I would say, it's been a long time in Toronto we faced this. But in smaller communities in Northern Ontario, everywhere, for people to be unable to afford rent anymore is really astonishing. And a lot of people like seniors, people on fixed income who see these above guideline increases continuing above and above, and they can't afford it, and they lose their homes. And we see it all the time. I have so many stories I could share. So we need to bring in real rent control. We really need a rent freeze right now, I would argue, so people don't lose their homes in the first place. That's the most important thing. That is really critical.
I'd love to hear a story, because I think, I spend too much time reading, Facebook comments and stuff like that, because I'm a bit of a masochist. I think a common refrain you hear is, well, this is the market just doing its thing. Why should some landlord be concerned that your rent is going up? Like, what do you think are some of the specific things that people don't understand about why it's just not as easy as just moving somewhere else when your rent goes up? Like, what is that human story?
First of all, I should say most of what I see out there is big corporate landlords, right? Big corporate landlords, not, small mom and pop landlords. Not that there can be, difficult mom and pop landlords too, but a lot of those folks, that's not what we're really seeing, where we're seeing this. What we're seeing is big corporations that have bought up these apartment buildings, and then they're trying to basically force people out so they can jack up their rent even more. So they go to try to put the rent up above the acceptable guideline. So you're allowed to go up, say, 2%, but instead I'm going to put it up 4% this year, or even higher. And there's very few checks and balances in place. It's really hard for tenants to fight back because frankly, landlords divide them. And it happens all the time. And I will tell you a story. I was in Ottawa a few months ago. I met a woman who was in a shelter, and she had to go through quite a journey to get to this shelter for women. But she was, I think, 64 years old, and 67 years old. And she had worked her whole life, raised her kids in the Ottawa area, and had a bad health issue, and had ended up in hospital. And when she got out, she had lost her home. And she found herself in a situation where she was, humiliated, embarrassed, didn't know where to turn. And she told me this story. She sat me down. And I want to tell you the story because she said, I could never in a million years have imagined myself living out of my car. But that's what happened. And she lived out of her car for, I think it was 11 weeks before somebody finally kind of came to her, like a housing worker, and said, like, okay, what are we going to do? Let's try to find you somewhere to go. She didn't want to she didn't want to go to one of the emergency shelters. She didn't feel safe there. She was scared. She was trying to, navigate a system that is not terribly easy to navigate, especially like in her case. And so she finally did end up where she's, but she just wanted to tell me that story because at the end of the day, that's what we are seeing happening for a lot of people. And it is older people, and it is a lot of older women. So it's not a unique story. I've heard it many times, variations of that. Yeah.
Provincial responsibilities overlap a lot with municipal responsibilities. Housing is one key area. Transportation is another. What do you think about the recent court decision that provided or reaffirmed Ford's ability to rip out bike lanes in Toronto?
Well, I think it's terrible. It's a terrible decision and unfortunate. As you said, they overlap a lot. It's important for people to understand. We say municipalities are creatures of the province. So
I need a sound effect whenever someone says that on the show.
Do you get it a lot?
Oh, it's a few times, of course, because I think it's the language in the Municipalities Act. Right?
It is. And so the municipalities, what that really means is that the province can do what it wants. Mm-hmm. They can pass a law. People always say to me, like, I don't understand. Isn't there a law against blah, blah? And I'm like, no, they make the laws. Yeah. They make the laws. We make the laws, right? So they change the laws, and they're doing in some regions of this province, they're going to appoint regional chairs to, they're going to, instead of electing them, they made the decision back in 2018. First thing he did when he got elected as premier, come in and mess around with the wards in the middle of a city election, you'll recall. So, this is something they can do. And I think when it comes to this decision on the bike lanes, it's a really bad one. And I could go on at great length, but ultimately, first of all, because the cities, communities should be able to decide these things for themselves, right? This didn't happen came out of nowhere. This came out of many, many years of discussions and debates and et cetera. So that's how the city landed there. But secondly, what do you think all of the cyclists, where do you think they're going to go? Mm-hmm. They're still going to be cycling. People are still going to be riding. They're just going to be riding around your car, people. And it's going to be more dangerous, and more people are going to get hurt. And as somebody who, I take transit, I also drive in the city. I don't want this. I want bike lanes because I think it is safer for me and for the cyclist when I'm driving, right? So I find it outrageous. But again, at the end of the day, really, this is a premier who is still punishing Toronto for the fact that Toronto did not choose him to be our mayor.
You make it sound like it's just it's a petty thing for Ford. Do you think it's a purely personal?
No, I do think that he is speaking to a concern that some people have, right? I think that he is speaking to, I think he's playing a very divisive politics, right? We know there are people who don't want bike lanes. We know there are people that find it irritating. But I think, again, we have found generally that, some of those people that are the most irritated aren't even in the areas where we have the bike lanes, right? Look, it's a decision that should be a city's decision. It should be made locally. It should be made with the input of local community members, and it shouldn't have Doug Ford shouldn't be imposing that kind of thing on the people of Toronto, just like he should not be imposing, stupid decisions that he's making on regions to appoint chairs that they don't want. People have a right and want to locally elect their representatives. They want those representatives to make decisions with their input. That's our democracy. Why does he have such a problem with that?
It feels like we very quickly get to a constitutional question sometimes.
Gosh.
And that's what every political leader wants to have a conversation around. Because, and now I won't ask you about to comment on this because this just can be my soapbox. But, let's say there is an NDP government that comes in after this, and you rewrite the laws to make it more democratic. Mm-hmm. Well, then, post your whatever 30, 40-year reign, whatever you could, the voters would bless you with.
From your lips to God's ears.
We'll see if this podcast can grow a little bit longer. Well, then, conservatives would come in right after and do it again. How do you not? The reason I bring this up is because I think a lot of, younger folks especially just feel very concerned, and you start to feel like people lose hope in the electoral process generally. Do you have any ideas around what can be done on a more like what are your kind of blue sky hopes on bike lanes or on any other issue to make sure that the policies that any government can enact in Ontario are better?
I mean, the simple answer is, and this doesn't really solve the problem, but is we have to stop governing based on 4-year electoral cycles. It's absurd. But I also think this is the reason why we as New Democrats are big fans of electoral reform and proportional representation, certainly at the provincial and federal level, because one of the things that would produce is more opportunities for parties of different maybe ideologies and political perspectives to actually have to come together and get things done. And in that respect, I think we'd end up with better laws, we'd end up with better programs, and we'd all be more invested in the outcomes. And I think the way our system is set up right now, it is actually oppositional, right?
Yeah.
No kidding. Like, I am the leader of the opposition. I mean, arguably my job is to oppose. I try not to only oppose, I try to propose solutions as much as possible, but it does, lead to that. The system that we have, it's kind of all or nothing. And so a system where we had more voices engaged and where a government was forced to work with other parties and actually have conversations and actually sit down together. I mean, I think that's good for everybody. And I think that's why a lot of young people also really love that idea, because it's frustrating. And I think it has led as well to a sense out there that, all politics is the same. It doesn't really matter. And lack of hope. And gosh, we could all use a little hope right now.
I don't think we're quite at class revolution. I don't think capitalism hasn't been fantastic over the past couple of years, but we're not quite there yet. When it comes to proportional representation, can we dig into this a little bit more? I was a poli-sci major, so I'll talk about electoral systems all day long.
Okay, let's go.
So a proportional system, the NDP would have a list, right? Is that how it would function typically? You have a list of your preferred candidates.
Yeah.
And based off of, everyone goes to vote in the province wide, based off of reaching certain thresholds, that many candidates are proportioned to each individual party.
Right. And there's different variations of this around the world. Some like basically what you're saying, though. Yeah. Very similar to that.
What do you think would change? Like, why would that be a manner to make a more collaborative and less oppositional approach to politics?
Because you would be able to vote. So even if you voted, like right now, people often say, how did we get this supermajority government when only like 30% of the people voted, right? Well, that's the problem. So if you want your vote to count more than if you were a Green Party voter, you might actually see more like 5 members of a legislature, or you might see more like what we see when we have a minority government situation right now, where it's very unlikely that the one party would have a super majority. They'd have maybe more seats than any of the other parties, but they'd be forced to work with the other parties in order to pass legislation.
Because right now, I think there's a lot of, although, I would make an argument that this dynamic might change at some point, is that a lot of left-leaning voters are making the decision between, you got the LPO, you got yourself, you've got the Green Party, the Rhinoceros Party, perhaps. I don't know if they're still kicking around.
I haven't seen the Rhinoceros Party around in a while.
Shame.
What is going on?
You'd think in the era of Lord Binface, they would be...
maybe this is your moment, Rhinoceros Party.
Wow, Rhinoceros Party gets a supermajority in the next election. Where was it going with this?
I think you were going to talk about whether or not people
are making a choice right now between you and the Liberal Party of Ontario.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
How do you think that's going?
Well, look, Liberal Party of Ontario does not have a leader right now. They are going through a leadership race, but this is the third one they've had since 2018 when I was first elected. And I'll be honest with you, I think some of what's going on is I think that in Ontario, the Liberal Party in Ontario is sort of figuring out who we are. Who are they? Who are they? And frankly, it's a bit of a grab bag right now. There's some difference there in perspectives. We know who we are, and we are the party. Like, we were founded by a coalition of working people, union members, working people, farmers. That's who we are. We've always been very clear about our values and what we stand for. And I mention that because I do think that right now the Liberal Party has become kind of like a parking lot where you park your vote maybe. And that's why sometimes you see the polls are pretty high for them. But I always think it's more like a parking lot for now. But yes, I mean, the Liberal Party has run in Ontario anyways, and maybe federally to some extent, a number of elections over the last few years, decades, where they end at the end of the day, they say, oh, it's a strategic vote. I'm sorry, New Democrats and people out there, Green Party members, whoever you are, but this time you have to vote Liberal. And a lot of people will say to me, I just did it this one time. But I think that increasingly people are getting tired of that approach because they want to vote for something they believe in. And New Democrats are usually we're pretty good at being very clear about where we stand on issues, what we believe in. We don't veer too far away from that. We are looking for new ideas. We're looking for some bold stuff to talk about always. But I think increasingly in Ontario, certainly since 2018, we have consistently come out ahead because at the end of the day, people know where we stand, and they really don't know who the Liberals are. And I should say, for me as the NDP leader, I need Liberal voters to vote for us too. I do. I need them to vote for us. I need them to vote for us, not just to defeat Conservatives, though, but to actually get some good things done for the people of Ontario.
You're missing a good angle on a dog in the background.
Oh, I'm very easily distracted by dogs.
Unfortunately, that dog endorsed Doug Ford. I'm sorry to say.
Oh. How do you know?
I was doing pre-interviews this whole place. What do you think what is a Liberal? I mean, you say Liberal voter. What do you think? What is the LPO to you? Like, you say parking lot. They would argue they call themselves pragmatic.
Yes, and I think it's not for me to define the Liberal Party of Ontario. Yeah. They need to do that for themselves, truly. I mean, I have my own party to worry about. Yeah. I don't need to be worrying about how they define themselves or who's going to lead them. I am very focused on talking to all Ontarians, and that includes people who have voted Liberal, but it also includes people who have voted Conservative. In fact, I'm very focused on that too, because, in many parts of this province, people actually shift between the Conservatives and the NDP. Yeah. That's a very real thing. And for me, what I want people to understand is that we want to be very clear about where we stand on issues. What we are putting forward solutions that will really impact the stuff that matters to people in their real lives, right? It's not esoteric. It's because that's the thing right now and that's why I think that some of Doug Ford's, stuff about the trade and everything and calling Trump names or whatever, for most people out there right now, they're just worried about, can I get food on the table for my family? Can I make the rent so that I can actually, I don't have time to think about the rest of this. I'm already juggling a couple of jobs. And so for me, it's how do I help those people? How do I help them get by? How do I help them when one of them gets sick? How do I help them to ensure that their kids are getting the support they need in school? Because that should be all of our concern, right? Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know this. I should have done more research on your beginning years in politics. What's your history with the NDP? Do you have a memory of when you decided, this is the party for me?
Yes, it was a boy. No, yeah, well, he actually was. But so I grew up and was born and raised in Newfoundland, and my parents were not very political, partisan political people at all. We had a small farm. They were. But they taught me very strong values. It was very much, stand up to bullies, take care of each other, a lot of things like that. And when I went to university, I was already pretty interested in especially international issues at the time. Like I was very active in my university on kind of anti-apartheid work at the time, and then I bumped into a boy in the cafeteria who I knew back from St. John's and at home, and he was giving out leaflets. NDP leaflets in the cafeteria. And I said, Jordan, it's so great to see you. We haven't seen each other in a while. And he said, right, yeah, vote NDP. So kind of happened like that. We're still together, by the way. And, but no, he was very active in the NDP, and I kind of got involved. I started to realize, there's an actual party that speaks for the things I care about internationally and right here. And so that's how I got involved. And then I've just been, kind of a volunteer over many years. And then when worked in lots of different places and organizations and unions. And then when I was in 2014, my kids were in our local public school, and I felt really passionately about public education and wanting to make sure our kids got better support and our schools were better supported. And I ran to be a public school trustee, and that's the first time I got elected.
We've got, I think, there's an election in everywhere in Toronto, it feels right now. We got the by-elections in the province. We got the by-elections in the federal. The municipal races heating up. A question I'm always curious about, and we don't have to get enough into this, is what's it like being a politician? Why? Because I talk a lot to city councilor candidates. That seems like a shitty job. Why do this work? Why is it important for you to speak up about these values? What is it that gets you out of bed every day when you're thinking about this?
Well, as long as I can remember, I felt like, I wanted to help people. I think a lot of us do, right? You see somebody who's struggling and you think, I'd like to help them. How do I do that? I don't have on my own. There's not much I can do. So I think that if you want to change things, then being elected is one way to do that. It's not the only way, but it's one of the ways to do that. And for me, it's what gets me up every day, honestly, is thinking that about those people that I've met who have been struggling, who've had a hard time. It's like the kids, when my kids were in school, it's the kid whose parents were, working even longer hours than I did to get by and didn't have time to come to the, parent council meetings, right? So who's gonna make sure we speak up for their kids? And so that's kind of what I do. It is, I think, right now, and particularly we're seeing this around the province, people not running again, school trustees not running again, councillors, mayors. And I think it is, I've talked to a lot of them. There's a toxic issue out there. People are very much, especially women, but not only women, are experiencing that. And it's pretty divided, and it can be really difficult. And by the way, I think that some of the most important elected people we have out there, and the people that are doing the most important work, are the most locally elected people. It's the municipal councillors, it's the wardens, it's the school trustees, right? They are dealing with the issues that people are very immediate for people every day. It's really important, and it's really hard when you have, I bring it back to the provincial government, when you have a provincial government that just kind of overrides their decisions, their rights all the time. It's very punishing. And so I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing that change a lot. Yeah.
Are we okay on time? Wrapping up? Okay. Last point here. There's a municipal race going on right now.
Yes.
How do you think that's going?
Oh, the municipal race?
Yeah.
Well, we just, I think nominations or applications just closed, right? So now the deadline day was last Friday.
A lot of excitement.
A lot of excitement. I think it's going to be an exciting race. I think that Mayor Chow has really, in a very short time, if you think about it, made some pretty extraordinary leaps in some really good directions. And I will say, in spite of not most of the time, not actually having a very strong provincial partner. And so I look forward to her continuing to do that work. I hope that this municipal election isn't a really negative, toxic one, because I see elements of that worry me. I think most people out there, like, we got to get people out to vote. However they vote, we need them voting. We need them to know that, like, this is something worth doing. And to do that, we have to keep things a bit more positive, I think. Let's talk about ideas and a vision for the city. Let's talk about how we're actually going to get things done, and not just undoing stuff all the time. Like you said, I mean, always undoing things means nothing ever happens. So let's sort of think about how we can move forward. And I'm excited about it. Yeah.
You have some by-elections coming up soon.
In fact, September 3rd, yes.
Yeah, which races are those?
York Simcoe, which was Caroline Mulroney's seat. Hamilton East Stony Creek, which was Neil Lumsden's seat. He retired, rather surprisingly, just recently. And Scarborough Southwest, where we have Fatima Shaban running, and we hold that seat currently, so we're hoping to continue to hold that seat. Hamilton East Stony Creek, we've got a wonderful former MPP named Monique Taylor running again, somebody who I think Doug Ford is shaken in his boots that she will possibly win this election, because she was quite a force in the legislature. Yeah.
If people are NDP supporters, I might have a couple who listen to this one. Where can people go online to, help out the cause? Right.
Well, if you go to our NDP Ontario NDP website, you can find that there. But you can also go to Vote Monique Taylor or Vote Fatima, I think it is .ca. I'm not going to get that right, but go online to find information about that. It's also all over my Instagram, so you can easily find it there.
And can I say, it's a great Instagram. I'm going to do a series. Day 100 of celebrating the NDP's digital team.
They are amazing.
They do a great job.
They really do a great job. I have a really great team. Yeah.
Marit Stiles, thank you so much for coming onto the show today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers. Cool.
That was very official at the end. I like that.
Cool. Thanks so much. That was great.
No problem.
If you liked what you just heard, Toronto the Politics, the show comes out with at least 3 free episodes every week. We are Toronto's only independent politics podcast. If you believe that more news should be owned by people and not by Rogers or Bell, and you want to support the show, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/TTPTS. Those are the initials of Toronto the Politics, the show. You can find us on Instagram at Toronto the Politics, this show. You can send us an email at torontothepoliticstheshow@gmail.com. All right. Bye-bye. Take care of each other.